Please, God, let it be a mistake, the pilot's heart, the plane's engine. God, please, don't let it be anyone who looks like my brothers. I don't know how bad a life has to break in order to kill. I've never been so hungry that I willed hunger. Never so angry as to want a gun over a pen. Not really. Even as a woman, a Palestinian, never this broken.
That was Suheir Hammad, our next guest, reading on HBO's Russell Simmons Presents Deaf Poetry soon after 9/11. And the themes that she raised there of anti-Arab racism and Islamophobia endure. We've all heard the stories of crowds at McCain-Palin rallies upon hearing Barack Obama's name crying out words like treason, terrorist, even kill him. At one recent rally, a woman asked the question to John McCain, "I've heard that Senator Obama is an Arab." He quickly cut the woman off, calling Obama a, quote, decent man, as if Muslims can't be decent. A few months ago at an Obama rally, Muslim women wearing Islamic headscarves were barred from a photo op, and recently 28 million anti-Muslim DVDs called Obsession to Hate have been distributed to voters in presidential swing states. This eruption of Islamophobia and anti-Muslim and anti-Arab bigotry may be a short-term political goal, but what are the implications for the long haul of our country? Well, somebody who thinks about those things full-time is our guest, Suheir Hammad, an award-winning poet and activist, now movie star, born to Palestinian immigrants. Hammad was raised in Brooklyn, New York. She's one of the original cast members in the Tony Award-winning Russell Simmons Presents Deaf Poetry Jam, and she's starring in her first feature film, Salt of the Sea, which premiered this year at Cannes. She has a new book of poems, Breaking Poems, out now. We'll talk about all of the above. Suheir, so happy to have you back in the studio.
I'm so happy to be here.
9/11 seems like such a long time ago, and in so many ways not long at all. This campaign has brought these topics right back to the surface. Has anything changed?
Changed? Well, I don't know if 9/11 actually changed a lot of people's realities. In the long vision of it, you know, Jack Shaheen has this book called Real Bad Arabs that talks about, from the time of the moving image, our image of the East, of Arabs and of Muslims in general. And so I think for a lot of people who are studying this resurgence, we're actually finding a trail that leads back to the beginning of the last century, at least. And then when we talk about the language that is being used, I think, you know, it's become cliche to say it harkens to the crusade. I don't think we can use the term crusade anymore, honestly. It's a different type of thing.
Mm. Colin Powell, we'll go to that clip. Colin Powell spoke on Meet the Press recently and addressed this whole exchange that happened on the campaign trail at a McCain rally. Decent or Muslim became the options, and this is what Colin Powell had to say.
I feel strongly about this particular point because of a picture I saw in a magazine. It was a photo essay about troops who were serving in Iraq and Afghanistan. And one picture at the tail end of this photo essay was of a mother in Arlington Cemetery, and she had her head on the headstone of her son's grave. And as the picture focused in, you could see the writing on the headstone. And it gave his awards, Purple Heart, Bronze Star, showed that he died in Iraq, gave his date of birth, date of death. He was 20 years old. And then at the very top of the headstone, it didn't have a Christian cross. It didn't have a Star of David. It had a crescent and a star of the Islamic faith. And his name was Kareem Rashad Sultan Khan. And he was an American. He was born in New Jersey. He was 14 years old at the time of 9/11. And he waited until he can go serve his country, and he gave his life.
That was Colin Powell speaking on Meet the Press this last weekend and complaining about John McCain's failure to effectively answer what a supporter supposedly said at a rally. Do you think Powell helped?
I felt so many things when I heard Powell speak. The first kind of sarcastic thing I thought was, oh, a good Muslim is a dead Muslim. And the idea that a Muslim who kills other Muslims, you know, after the hundreds of thousands, the millions of Iraqi lives lost through several administrations in our country, that now we can talk about decent human beings. It was difficult to listen to him. And then I know those 7-year-old boys. I know those 17-year-old boys
you
in the
have two
States.
brothers in the Navy.
I had one brother who was in the Navy, and I have lots of friends who have family members who serve That term, again, has been corrupted, what the idea of serving your country means. I don't know what people, I know Wajat Ali wrote for the Washington Post yesterday, this idea of the American Muslim now being the kind of boogeyman of this campaign. And again, if you look at it, you see a long tradition of Islamophobia and fear of the East in general. But it's also part of the anti-immigration trends that we have in our country. You can't talk, for me, you don't talk about the wall in Palestine without talking about the wall between the U.S. and Mexico, and now the U.S. and Canada. I mean, there are all these other things that this particular strain of hatred fits into. And I think the fear for me is always to distinguish between this kind of ethnic hate and that kind of ethnic hate, which has more legitimacy. They all are actually part of a larger fear of the other that we're having in America right now. We see it with queer politics. We see it with the prison system. We see it in anyone who's marginalized, anyone who has something different to say is being kind of highlighted. Even now, I heard that, is it a congresswoman from Minnesota was asking about American and anti-American congresspeople? I mean, if you go to the effort of running for Congress, I guess you're supporting the electoral system somehow.
And you have a vice presidential candidate who talks about American and not so American parts of the country. Talk about your own experience. You've spent a lot of time out of this country in the last 7 years. Has that been intentional?
Well, it's nice to feel loved as a person of Palestinian descent, and it happens outside of America. I mean, I remember the first time I went to South Africa, my first trips to the South Pacific, my first trips anywhere, having been raised in America, raised in New York City, and always, you know, coming into a situation like bracing myself for the coming out as a Palestinian moment, and leaving the States and not having to do that. Like, not having to defend my pure ethnic identity without getting into a conversation about anything at all. So I think as an artist, it's definitely helped me feel freer and made me also appreciate my Americanness more. It's made me look at my privileges more as an American, my privileges as, you know, a second-generation American, all of those things. I wish more Americans could travel. It's really expensive. It's getting more and more so. And we're not taught, I wasn't taught in my educational history that I would travel, or that American women, for instance, would travel abroad and see the world through these kind of hyphenated ideas that we have about our citizenship.
It's the price the rest of us pay for racism and bigotry. We don't want you leaving. Stay. We miss you.